Hello, I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. Can you see it? So Long, See You Tomorrow by William Maxwell. We've just discussed it with Emily's Walking Book Club on Zoom, of course, because currently we can't meet in person. It was a really good discussion. Loads of people came, and we all agreed that this book felt extremely well constructed, extremely kind of thoughtful, and like there was a very self-conscious layer of sort of thoughtful writing in it. Where we disagreed was that most of us really loved this about the book and felt it was its real strength, that each sentence felt so crafted, that everything was so well thought out, and this kind of torturous exploration of grief and love and relationships was really benefited from that slightly torturous feeling. But some of us felt that this self-conscious layer was really the book's undoing, and they felt slightly distanced by it, and it didn't feel kind of engrossing enough for them. So yeah, same device, different responses, and that's what I love about book clubs, is that we all feel differently, and the discussion really helps us reevaluate and consider these things. So William Maxwell wrote this book it was published in the 80s. His earlier work sort of dates from the 30s, so it's quite a long span in which time he didn't actually write that much, because for most of that time he was the fiction editor of the New Yorker, where he edited like all the greats. So J.D. Salinger, John Updike, John Cheever, Sylvia Townsend Warner, so many great writers were edited by him. And so perhaps it's no surprise really that his own work feels so edited as well. Every word has been thought through, every word counts. So this book begins with a pistol shot. It's a really great description, and I'm just going to read one sentence from that first beginning, the only beginning, first chapter. Describes this pistol shot. He says, it could have been a car backfiring, but then he says, the sound was not a car backfiring. A tenant farmer named Lloyd Wilson had just been shot and killed, and what they heard was the gun that killed him. So for me, this book is really balanced by these twin forces. There's the force of death that we just see there in that pistol shot, the opening shot. In a way, it's a bit like a race, I suppose, isn't it? The starting gun. So there's this sort of propulsion of death, both of Lloyd Wilson, but also of the narrator's mother. And I think it's important to say that in this book, the narrator and the author are very closely aligned. It's really part memoir, and many of Maxwell's books have that similar alignment between narrator and author. There is a really close link, and the narrator's mother dies when he was very young, as did Maxwell's, and really the death of his mother is behind so much of his work. It comes up again and again as the resource or inspiration or driving force of much of his work, understandably. So there's this kind of double death looming over the book, very cheery. But I think it's important to note the opposite force in this book, which is love and life. And there's just a moment when Lloyd Wilson, who, obviously we know is going to be killed, he essentially has an affair with his neighbour's wife. Sorry, that's a bit of a spoiler, but I don't think it's a real spoiler because you know from the beginning that he's going to be killed. And I think Maxwell writes so well about the kind of terrible inevitability of this affair, that even though he knows it's not going to end well, and of course we know it's not going to end well, he does it anyway. And it's because the sheer joy of this moment of love, of pure kind of lust, love, passion, is worth it. And he actually even says, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but I really remember that feeling when you're sort of newly in love that you just can't sleep. And I'm just going to read a tiny bit out. It's on page 81. The flood of this is Lloyd Wilson. The flood of feeling that informed his heart was like nothing he had ever experienced. If his wife, lying with her back to him on the far side of the bed, knew he was awake, she did not show it. Reassured by the sound of her breathing, he lit a match and looked to see what time it was. He had never before not been able to fall asleep the minute his head hit the pillow. Now hour after hour went by, and he felt no need for sleep. He felt as if he had just been born. So that kind of slightly balances out the sort of double death. So the other thing I'm going to talk about, so we talked about that. We also talked about the idea of memoir, and does this count as a memoir, or is it a novel, or is it sort of somewhere in that grey area of autofiction, which is such a sort of voguish term now, but I'm not sure it was even around when this was written. Maxwell wrote or said in an interview really brilliantly that he felt that true autobiography has a candour that comes from the intention of the writer to hand over his life. So I think it's such a great way of thinking about autobiography and what that word really means. And he contrasts that with this writing, in which he says it's really just fragments, in which I am a character written from a considerable distance. So I suppose while reading this book, it's worth weighing that up and thinking, is there an element of autobiography here, or is it really just too fragmented and too distanced? How much do we agree with him? So, of course, there's all this death and grief, and the moment that really hit me as being very powerful. So I'm going to be totally honest and say that when I started reading this, I didn't totally get what all the fuss was about. So many people have told me this is this amazing book. And I think, to start with, I was on the side of feeling like this sort of torturous construction. There's this whole bit about a Giacometti piece of art. It's all so kind of convoluted. I just thought, oh, I don't really like this. What am I missing? But then once we really get into not so much the narrator's story, but Cletus's story. Cletus is the son of the person who murdered Lloyd Wilson. Then I found it just heartbreaking and so compelling, and I even cried at points. And one bit that really hit me as being especially powerful was this. So it's right near the end when Cletus's whole world has fallen apart. Whether they are part of home or home is part of them is not a question children are prepared to answer. Having taken away the dog, take away the kitchen, the smell of something good in the oven for dinner, also the smell of wash day, of wool drying on the wooden rack, of ashes, of soup simmering on the stove. Take away the patient old horse waiting by the pasture fence. Take away the chores that kept him busy from the time he got home from school until they sat down to supper. Take away the early morning mist, the sound of crows quarrelling in the treetops. His work clothes are still hanging on a nail beside the door of his room, but nobody puts them on or takes them off. Nobody sleeps in his bed or reads the broken-backed copy of Tom Swift and his flying machine. Take that away too while you're at it. Take away the pitcher and bowl, both of them dry and dusty. Take away the cow barn, where the cats, sitting all in a row, wait with their mouths wide open for somebody to squirt milk down their throats. Take away the horse barn too, the smell of hay and dust and horse piss and old sweat-stained leather and the rain beating down on the ploughed field beyond the open door. Take all this away, and what have you done to him? In the face of a deprivation so great, What is the use of asking him to go on being the boy he was? He might as well start life over again as some other boy instead. So I think it just shows you his undoing, how everything has come away, and what a powerful thing it is to lose everything. Reading it back there, endlessly saying this sort of take away, it's like a sum, and you come eventually to zero. And it reminds me actually of some other books that we've read together in the Walking Book Club, both Frost in May and H is for Hawk, which actually is also, of course, about grief. And I think in both books, there's that same feeling of being broken down, of having to somehow reach nothing in order to be built up again, which I think is articulated so well here. You take it away, why be that boy again? Of course you're going to be someone new. And I suppose it's about so much this book, and perhaps the writing of the book was for Maxwell a way of processing a grief and building himself up again, once you've come through that. Not to psychoanalyze him or anything. So all in all, I think it's worth persisting with the book. If it doesn't grab you straight away, stick with it. Stick with it until you get really into Cletus's story, and I think you'll be rewarded. Thank you so much for those of you who came. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, or drop me a line, and I hope to see you for our next webcast and our next book club, in which we're going to be talking about The Pumpkin Eater by Penelope Mortimer. Okay. I thought I'd just show you a picture of Palace at 4 AM by Giacometti. It's a very beautiful construction, slightly torturous, like the book, and you can see how playing on a building site might make you think of this, as well as the different levels of subconscious and all those thoughts at play. Here is William Maxwell at his desk, looking thoughtful, busy, like he's just been interrupted perhaps. And here are our wonderful Walking Book Club members. Thank you for joining me on Zoom. You can see we're all, well, most of us are giving the book a thumbs up.